I think now Europe is thinking, okay, maybe it can be repaired. They're telling Zelensky, go, with your hat in your hand and apologize, which he's refusing to do thus far.
Welcome to Restoring America, a project of the Washington Examiner. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube or any other platform. I'm Jeremiah Poff. I'm the editor of Restoring America. I'm joined again today by Tom Rogan, my esteemed colleague. Tom, it's been quite an eventful weekend. What's going on in Ukraine right now after a very eventful visit to the United States?
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing.
Yeah, well, it seems that we're kind of in a no man's land of uncertainty at the moment. The disagreement between President Trump and President Zelensky has obviously reverberated into the minerals deal not being yet agreed, although it may be in the coming hours and days, and American future support for Ukraine being uncertain. So a lot of discord between the two leaders clearly in that meeting and ensuing. I think Zelensky feels that he was sort of ambushed by the president and Vance, vice president, and obviously Trump feels that he was disrespected and that Zelensky came in sort of lecturing and demanding rather than showing due deference.
I was stunned by that whole exchange. I've never seen anything like it in any sort of diplomatic setting. Typically, you can just contrast it to the day before. Keir Starmer came into the Oval Office.
And Macron, yeah.
And a couple days before that with Macron.
And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course.
Starmer's in the Oval Office. He hands Trump a letter from the King and saying, we're going to have another state visit. This is historic. How great is this? This is the special relationship. And then the day after, Zelensky comes in there and they kick him out after this astounding exchange. Do you think it was a setup?
I don't think it was a setup. I mean, the contention to say it wasn't was that period before the blow-up where it was quite calm.
If you watch the first 40 minutes of that exchange, it looks more like the conversation with Starmer the day before.
Right.
I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting. They're great fighters. And you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with. It's enough, right? If we want to get it over with. So
I think, what happened is that, there was this, push by Zelensky to essentially, challenge some of the President Trump's perceptions of Russia. And then where it became problematic was Zelensky, then when Trump was trying to push back and assert authority with Vance, Zelensky sort of escalated in turn.
What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems.
And I thought that was a mistake on a big mistake on Zelensky's part, because whatever you think of President Trump's policies, he doesn't have a small ego, and you're in the Oval Office. You've got to, play the cards in the room that you're playing in. And in that case, it would have been far better for him, I think, in Ukraine's interests, to take a more conciliatory stance, at least in the public side of that meeting.
Well, right. Like typically when you see, typically if this stuff happens, it happens behind closed doors.
Right.
And then that was really what was one of the most striking things to me about the fact that this played out in public, and seeing Trump just like straight up telling him, you're sitting here trying to negotiate with me without any leverage. And Zelensky, I thought was kind of in denial of that.
Right.
And I think just totally misread the moment, misread the room, and what could have been a big moment towards progressing towards peace with the signing of the minerals deal ended up being a major step backwards. I want to ask you, how did the Europeans how are the Europeans kind of seeing this vis-a-vis America? Because you really can't have a lasting peace in Ukraine without the United States' involvement.
Right.
And if Trump is, as he's noted, basically taking this on, with a very severe amount of insult, I think he should. Where does that leave the rest of the NATO countries that have kind of unflinchingly backed Ukraine under pretty much any circumstance?
Well, I think that, they had their heads in their hands, thinking this is the worst thing that could happen.
Kind of like the ambassador in the Oval Office.
Exactly, and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, who also looked kind of rather alarmed by the situation. But I think now Europe is thinking, okay, maybe it can be repaired. They're telling Zelensky, go, with your hat in your hand and apologize, which he's refusing to do thus far, which again shows, one of the things I always come back to is that, yes, he's a very courageous leader, saved his country, whatever, but he's not Winston Churchill. Churchill would have said what he needed to say to get Trump on side. Zelensky's ego prohibits him from making decisions that are plainly in Ukraine's national interests, and that is a poor character attribute for a leader, especially in wartime.
Unfortunately, though, we seem to only have a tendency to have one historical reference point when it comes to...
Of course, yes, that's true. And there is legitimacy on Zelensky's part. Why isn't President Trump putting more pressure on Putin, at this point? I mean, if it can't all be one-sided. But again, do that behind closed doors. It doesn't help Ukraine's interests vis-a-vis President Trump to be, de facto insulting him. But what are the Europeans doing? I think now they're hoping maybe there'll be a restoration of relations and that the American backstop security guarantee for the European peacekeeping force, which is the crux of any deal that can be agreed by Ukraine or endure. Mm-hmm. But I also think they're thinking, okay, this probably, may well not happen now, and so it's going to be up to us to provide the military support to Ukraine in an increased measure, which they should have been, of course, doing.
Well, I think that's rather ironic, given that Trump has rather, said specifically, start spending more.
Right.
This is not, this is your backyard. Take care of it.
Right, and they are doing that, but in various terms, right? The British and French are upticking, but not by huge amounts. The Polish are doing a huge amount.
Well, the Poles have always been kind of the outlier in terms of,
and the Baltic states, to be fair, and Finland to a degree. But yes, the Europeans can and should do more. Can't just be all German complaints, which is kind of astonishing. The Germans still think people take them credibly when they just whinge and then don't do anything. And they're not doing as much for Ukraine as they pretend when you dive into the details from the Kiel Institute, which is funded partly by the German government, which all the journalists like to use as their reference for who's doing what. Anyway,
state propaganda, a little bit.
A little bit of a rant there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, there's so much uncertainty. We have to see what happens in the coming days and weeks. I always come back to the point where people say Trump is, surrendering to Russia. In the first, early on in the administration, he put out a social media post saying, if Putin doesn't come to the table, we'll have to sanction Russia like never before. So maybe we're only seeing the one side of
Trump. This thing about Trump is he'll say things like that, and then on the next thing he'll say Zelensky's a dictator who doesn't have elections. The whole point of it is that he'll say something really crazy in one direction, and you don't really know where he sits.
Right.
And I think that's part of what makes his negotiation tactics so largely effective, because nobody really knows where he stands until he actually gets the deal done that he was looking for.
Right.
But another thing that I was really struck by the aftermath of this was the fact that a whole bunch of Ukraine hawks in Congress on the Republican side immediately were like, oh no, this is bad.
Right.
Zelensky is the problem here. Trump, how could, he needs to go now. I mean, I never in a million years thought that Lindsey Graham would be calling for regime change in Ukraine.
What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again.
What do you think of that? And did he make lasting damage with his relationships on the Hill?
I don't think he made lasting damage with his relationships on the Hill. I think that rhetoric reflects deep concern by those people that Zelensky's and Trump's relationship is irreparably damaged, and that Trump is obviously
But Trump's also notorious for bringing people back. It
is true. But I think they just thought, and I also think there's a concern and frustration that Zelensky is known for being obstinate. As we see, he still hasn't, apologized, or he's still.
I mean, he had an opportunity to do it.
He's had repeated, and Yalda Hakim from Sky News. He's had a lot of opportunities, and he's being reticent to. So I think they're concerned that this is just not going to be repaired, and they wanted to get in front of that and put pressure on him to realize how serious the situation is.
Is in a sense Zelensky sort of undermining his own cause against
100%. Well, that's
Russia? Effectively, he's like giving Russia what they want by how he's handling this.
Completely. I mean, and I don't. That's what I say as a Ukraine supporter, is that I don't understand. Obviously there's a lot of partisan stuff going around in terms of the analysis of what happened, but plainly it is not in Ukraine's interest for Zelensky to be on bad personal terms with Trump. And if the price for that is to come cap in hand and sort of apologize, even if it makes you want him throw up, now that's what leaders do. Suck it up, get in there. I mean, and then for history we see this. I mean, you don't.
Pride is often the bringer of the fall, right?
Right.
The pride comes before the fall.
Right. Yeah. And and if it was the other way around, right? If Trump was the leader of America was small and Ukraine was the only superpower, okay, it would be a different thing. Trump would have to go cap in hand, but it isn't the case.
Right. Please be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. Until next time, be sure to check out washingtonexaminer.com. Thank you.